Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really jumping into the world of social work. It's such a crucial field, right? Sitting right there at the crossroads of human connection, ethics, and, well, making things better.
Our mission today, you could say, is to really unpack the core ideas, the foundational principles, and the practical stuff they actually do.
Yeah, we want to pull out those key nuggets of knowledge, things that act as like a moral GPS for how professionals should act.
Exactly, a moral GPS. And also look at the tools they use, the things that shape how they care for clients and support communities.
And I think this is important. This isn't just for people in the field.
No, not at all. What we're talking about here, these ideas offer really powerful lessons about connection, about ethics, about speaking up for others, stuff that's relevant to, well, pretty much everyone.
That's a great way to put it. So let's start right at the foundation. The moral compass, the core concepts. What's the absolute bedrock document for social workers?
Okay, so right at the heart of it all is the NSW Code of Ethics, NSW being the National Association of Social Workers.
Right.
And its main job, basically to guide how social workers should behave and make decisions in their practice. It really is that moral GPS we mentioned.
A moral GPS. I like that. It makes it really clear. Now, a huge value in that code is social justice. It's, big and important. But what does it actually look like day to day for a social worker?
Well, it means this deep commitment to making sure everyone gets fair treatment, fair access, fair opportunities.
Hmm.
In practice, it's about constantly looking at the systems. Are they unfair? Are people being left out? It's about advocating for those who don't have a voice, trying to break down those barriers people face. Sometimes they're obvious, sometimes less.
So it goes beyond just helping one person.
Oh, definitely. It's seeing how one person's struggle might connect to a bigger issue in society and then asking, okay, how can we work on that bigger issue? That's where the tough work often lies.
Okay, so keeping those big principles in mind, let's clarify some basic terms they use all the time, like caseload. Sounds simple, just a number, right? But what are the tricky parts?
Right. So caseload is just the number of clients or cases a social worker is handling. But the tricky part, the tightrope walk, is balancing that number with the quality of care you can give.
Yeah, too many cases.
Exactly. A high caseload means less time per person, less attention. It puts huge pressure on time management. And frankly, it can force really difficult choices about who gets your focus. And that impacts care and can lead to burnout, to compassion fatigue for the worker, too.
Makes sense. Then we hear about direct versus indirect practice. Let's start with direct practice. What does that involve, beyond maybe just therapy sessions?
So direct practice is all about that face-to-face relationship. But yeah, it's more than just sitting in an office. It could be handling a crisis call at 3 a.m. It could be mediating a really tense family argument right there in their home, or providing support right after something traumatic happens.
Right.
It's about being right there, engaged, often in really intense immediate situations when someone's feeling incredibly vulnerable.
So if that's direct, how does indirect practice help people if there's no face-to-face?
Indirect practice is all the work that supports clients, but maybe behind the scenes. Think advocating for policy changes that affect lots of people, doing research to figure out what actually works best, or maybe developing and running community programs.
Oh, I see.
It's working more on the system level or setting things up to create better conditions overall, which ends up helping many individuals down the line.
Both sound absolutely vital. Now, there's some legal ideas underpinning this, too. There's this term, Parens Patriae. Sounds kind of old-fashioned.
It is old, but it's really fundamental. Parens Patriae, it's Latin, basically means parent of the nation. It's a legal idea that says the state has the right, and maybe the duty, to step in and act like a guardian for people who can't protect themselves.
Like who?
Like minors, or adults who have severe impairments and can't make decisions for their own safety or well-being. It reflects the state's ultimate responsibility for vulnerable citizens.
Okay, that idea of state responsibility is interesting. So, thinking about putting all this into action, when a social worker first meets a new client, where do they even begin? What's the absolute first, most critical step?
The first step, almost always, is doing some kind of needs assessment or intake. You have to understand their specific situation, their strength, their challenges, get the lay of the land before you can even think about helping.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is that first step so absolutely critical for everything that follows?
Because that assessment tells you what the client, or maybe even a whole community, actually needs. It helps you see where the gaps are in services, what the person's priorities are, resources they already have. Without it, You're just guessing.
Flying blind, basically.
Exactly. You can't create a plan that's actually going to work for them and their reality if you haven't done that initial deep dive into their needs.
That makes total sense. So
Yeah.
once you've got that groundwork laid.
Right, then the focus shifts. It becomes about how you approach and interact with the client. This is where things like empathy and specific strategies really matter.
Okay. And one big idea here is the strengths-based perspective. How did that change the conversation compared to just focusing on, what's wrong?
It totally reframes it. Instead of just listing problems or deficits, the strengths-based perspective is about actively looking for and building on what the client can do, their abilities, their resilience, the resources they already possess, maybe without even realizing it.
So you're leveraging what's already there.
Precisely. You're recognizing their inherent capabilities and using those as the foundation for empowerment and change.
And that sounds closely linked to client self-determination. It seems like that puts the client firmly in the driver's seat.
It does, and that's intentional. Client self-determination is the client's fundamental right to make their own choices about their life and their care. Even if the social worker thinks, maybe there's a better path.
Even if the social worker disagrees.
Yes. The social worker's role is to provide information, explore options, offer support, but not to dictate the choices. And this connects directly to empowerment.
How so?
Because when clients make their own choices, even small ones, they start to regain a sense of control and confidence. It helps them develop their own voice, their own ability to decide what's truly best for them, not just what someone else thinks is best.
So it's about building that internal capacity, not just fixing an external problem.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk consent. There's implied consent.
Yeah.
That seems fairly obvious.
Yeah, implied consent is when you assume agreement based on someone's actions. Like if a client shows up for appointments and participates willingly, you might assume they consent to the service. But it's always better to make it explicit whenever you can. Just verbally clarify, are you okay with us working together on this, even if it seems obvious? Clarity avoids misunderstandings.
Right. So here's where it gets really interesting. What makes informed consent different from just someone showing up? What's required?
Informed consent is a much higher standard. It's a core ethical requirement. It means the client has to have a clear understanding of what the service involves, the potential risks, the potential benefits, any alternative options available.
Okay.
And crucially, they have to agree voluntarily, without pressure, before you start any significant treatment or intervention. It's all about transparency and ensuring their participation is truly knowledgeable and freely chosen.
That makes sense. It builds trust. And speaking of trust, confidentiality seems like the absolute cornerstone of the social worker-client relationship.
Oh, it's the bedrock. Absolutely. Confidentiality means protecting the client's private information like Fort Knox. You have to guard it fiercely to build and maintain that trust. If clients don't trust you'll keep their information safe, they simply won't share what you need to know to help them.
But there are exceptions, right?
Yes, there are very specific, legally required exceptions, but they are limited, usually related to preventing harm.
And then there's something called privileged communication. That sounds even stronger, legally speaking.
It is. Privileged communication is a specific legal right. It protects clients from having their private conversations with certain professionals, like social workers in many contexts, revealed in court or other legal proceedings, without their explicit consent. It's an extra layer of legal protection for that sensitive relationship.
Got it. So back to confidentiality. When is it okay or even required to break it? That must be an incredibly tough call.
It is a very tough call, and it's only appropriate or required when there is a clear and imminent risk of serious harm, either the client harming themselves or harming someone else.
Imminent risk.
Yes. Sometimes this is called having just cause. It's not a decision made lightly, and it has to be based on credible evidence of immediate danger.
Can you give an example where confidentiality wouldn't be breached even if something serious comes up?
Sure. Let's say an adult client talks about abuse they suffered years ago as a child. The abuser is no longer in their life, maybe they've passed away, or there's no contact, there's no current danger. In that case, the ethical duty isn't to report the past abuse. It's to help the client process the impact of that trauma, offer support for their healing now. The focus is on their current well-being. Reporting isn't mandated because there's no present threat.
That distinction is critical. So when a social worker hits one of those really complex ethical dilemmas, maybe where different principles seem to conflict, what's the immediate first step? This raises an important question about who to turn to when things get sticky.
Yeah, and you don't want to try and figure those out alone. The very first step is always consult the code of ethics, see what guidance it offers, and then immediately seek supervision, talk it through with a supervisor, a mentor, maybe even consult an ethics committee if needed. You need that external perspective.
Don't go it alone.
Oh.
Okay, so we've covered principles. Let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the practical tools and frameworks they use to actually do the work, to understand and help clients. How do they get that whole picture of someone's life?
Right. Good assessment is key. And one of the main tools for getting that comprehensive view is the biopsychosocial assessment.
Biopsychosocial. Okay, what does that look at?
It looks at exactly those three areas: biological factors like health, genetics, physical condition; psychological factors, mental health, thoughts, feelings, behaviors; and social factors, family, relationships, community, culture, economic situation.
So it's holistic.
Exactly. It aims for a really holistic picture, understanding how all these different parts interact to shape the person's functioning and well-being.
Then there's a functional assessment. How's that different? What's its focus?
A functional assessment zeroes in more on a client's ability to perform activities of daily living, or ADLs, and instrumental activities of daily living, IADLs. So things like bathing, dressing, eating, but also managing money, shopping, using transportation.
Ah, practical stuff.
Very practical. It's super important in areas like rehab, working with older adults, or disability services. It helps figure out what specific support someone needs to manage their day-to-day life safely and effectively.
Okay. And our sources mentioned the Global Assessment of Functioning Scale, the GAF scale. Apparently, it's still kicking around even though it's not officially in the latest diagnostic manual, the DSM-5.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The GAF scale gives a single number, usually 1 to 100, to rate someone's overall psychological, social, and occupational functioning. And you're right, the DSM-5 replaced it with other measures, but
Right.
you still see it on licensing exams sometimes, and it's definitely an older client record. So yeah, it's good for social workers to know what it is and how it was used.
Good to know.
Hmm.
Now, moving from assessment to intervention frameworks. Case management sounds like it brings a lot of things together.
It really does. Case management is all about coordination. It's the process of planning, linking, coordinating, monitoring, and advocating for services and resources to meet a client's complex needs.
So, connecting the dots.
Exactly. Making sure the client gets plugged into the right support systems, that services aren't overlapping or missing, and tracking how things are going. It's like being the conductor of an orchestra of services.
And after the assessment, and maybe case management is involved, there's the treatment plan. What's its core purpose?
The treatment plan is the roadmap. Its purpose is to set clear, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART goals, basically for the client's care.
SMART goals, right?
Yeah. It outlines what interventions will be used, who's responsible for what, and the timelines. It keeps the work focused, helps measure progress, and makes sure everyone, including the client, is on the same page about where things are headed.
Now, often you hear about the gold standard for choosing which interventions to use. Our sources highlight evidence-based practice, EBP. Why is that considered the gold standard?
EBP is considered the gold standard because it integrates three key things. One, the best available research evidence about what works for a particular problem or population. Two, the social worker's own clinical expertise and judgment. And three, the client's unique values, preferences, and circumstances.
So it's not just about the research.
No, it's the integration of all three. It ensures that the help being offered is not just based on tradition or intuition, but has scientific backing, fits the practitioner's skills, and respects the client's perspective and choices. It's powerful.
Okay. And another specific technique mentioned is motivational interviewing, MI. That sounds really interesting. How does that work?
MI is a fantastic approach. It's very client-centered. It's specifically designed to help people explore and resolve their ambivalence, that feeling of being stuck, wanting to change, but also not wanting to.
So you're not pushing them.
Not at all. It's non-confrontational. The idea is to use specific communication skills, open questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries to help the client tap into their own motivation and reasons for making a positive change. It's about drawing it out of them, not imposing it.
That sounds really respectful. Shifting perspective again, what about the bigger theories that influence how social workers see the world? Ecological systems theory, Bronfenbrenner's model, comes up a lot.
Yes, Bronfenbrenner's theory is hugely influential. Its core idea is that you can't understand an individual in isolation. People are nested within and constantly interacting with multiple levels of systems.
Like layers of an onion.
Kind of. You've got the microsystem, their immediate environment, family, school, peers. Then the mesosystem, the connections between those immediate settings. The exosystem, indirect influences like parents' workplaces or community resources. And the macrosystem, the larger cultural values, laws, economic conditions.
Oh, complex.
It shows how everything's interconnected and influences the individual. It encourages social workers to think broadly about all the factors affecting a client.
Okay. And related to that breadth, what does generalist practice mean in social work?
Generalist practice means having a broad knowledge base and a versatile set of skills that allow you to work with diverse client populations across different types of systems, individuals, families, groups, organizations, communities.
So like a GP in medicine.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. Generalist practitioners have a wide toolkit and can intervene at multiple levels. They often form the foundation of social work practice before people specialize.
Right, which brings us to specializing in a field of practice.
Exactly. A field of practice is where a social worker chooses to focus their expertise. It could be child welfare, mental health, healthcare, aging or gerontology, substance use, school social work. Lots of areas. It allows for deeper knowledge and skills in one specific domain. Now, having all these tools and theories is one thing, but operating ethically and legally is absolutely paramount. This brings us to professional boundaries and accountability.
Yeah, this feels like a really critical area.
Mhm.
Let's talk about conflict of interest. What does that mean in this context?
A conflict of interest happens when a social worker's personal interests, maybe financial, relational, or other personal gains, clash or even appear to clash with their professional duties and responsibilities to their client.
So it compromises their judgment.
It can, or it can create the appearance of bias, which erodes trust. The client's needs must always come first, without interference from the worker's personal agenda.
And that relates to dual relationships, right? Our source had a clear example. Say you're assigned a close friend as a client. What's the right move?
The right move, the only ethical move, is to not take them on as a client. You need to refer them to another social worker or agency. You simply cannot effectively be someone's therapist or primary social worker and their close friend simultaneously.
Why not?
Because the boundaries get blurred. Objectivity is compromised, confidentiality can become complicated, and the power dynamic inherent in the professional role gets tangled up with the personal one. It's messy and potentially harmful to both the client and the friendship.
Okay. So avoid dual relationships.
Yeah.
What's a common sign that a professional boundary might be getting crossed, maybe unintentionally?
A classic example is accepting significant gifts from a client. A small token might be okay, depending on context and agency policy, but an expensive gift, that can definitely blur the lines.
How so?
It can create a sense of obligation, either for the worker or the client. It changes the dynamic from purely professional to something else. It can compromise the worker's objectivity down the line. Best practice is generally to politely decline significant gifts.
Makes sense. What about a seemingly small request, like a client asking for a ride home after a session? Seems helpful, maybe harmless.
It seems harmless, but it's generally advised against. Again, it crosses that professional boundary. Your role is therapist or case manager, not taxi service. Maintaining that role, clarity is important for ethical practice. You typically help them explore transportation options instead.
What's fascinating here is how even seemingly small gestures can blur the lines. It really highlights the need for clear, consistent boundaries.
Absolutely. It protects both the client and the professional relationship. Now, shifting to legal duties, mandated reporting. What exactly does that involve? Mandated reporting is a legal requirement for certain professionals, including social workers in all U.S. states, to report suspected abuse or neglect of vulnerable populations.
Like children.
Yes, children primarily, but often also elders and adults with disabilities who may be unable to protect themselves. It's a legal obligation that overrides client confidentiality in specific situations of suspected harm.
And what's the protocol after a social worker makes a mandated report? They call it in, then what?
Standard procedure is to immediately inform your supervisor about the report being made. And critically, you need to document everything thoroughly in the case. Record what you observed or were told, why you suspected abuse neglect, when and to whom you made the report. Documentation is key for accountability.
Okay, now let's talk about when things go wrong with professional conduct. What constitutes malpractice in social work?
Malpractice is essentially professional negligence. It means the social worker failed to meet the expected standard of care for their profession, and that failure directly caused harm or injury to the client.
Can you give an example?
A stark example might be a social worker assessing a client as being at high risk for suicide, documenting that risk, but then failing to take appropriate safety planning steps or follow-up actions, and the client subsequently attempts or completes suicide. That failure to act according to standard care could be malpractice.
That's serious.
Yeah.
And what about malfeasance? How is that different? It sounds worse.
It generally is. Malfeasance implies intentional wrongdoing or illegal conduct in your professional role. It's not just negligence, it's actively doing something unethical or unlawful.
Like what?
Like like intentionally falsifying records, misusing client funds, engaging in a sexual relationship with a client, or abusing the power of their position for personal gain. It's a serious breach of trust and ethics.
Okay, what if you, as a social worker, suspect a colleague is acting unethically or harming clients? That must be incredibly awkward and difficult. What's the first step?
It is difficult, but the ethical obligation is clear. Client safety comes first. The first step isn't usually direct confrontation. It's typically to consult your supervisor or follow your agency's internal procedures. If that's not appropriate or effective, you might need to consult with the NASW or the state licensing board. You address it through proper channels.
Go through the system? And lastly, in this area, what if a social worker realizes their own feelings or biases are getting in the way? They just can't stay objective with a particular client. What should they do?
Self-awareness is key here. If a social worker recognizes they're struggling with objectivity, the first step is supervision. Talk it through, explore the reasons, see if objectivity can be regained through support and insight.
And if not?
If, after seeking supervision, they still feel they can't provide unbiased, effective care, the ethical responsibility is to discuss transferring the client to another professional who can be objective. It's about prioritizing the client's well-being over the worker's discomfort or attachment.
That takes real integrity. Okay, let's move into another really nuanced area, working effectively and respectfully with diverse populations and really focusing on client safety and well-being.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial. Let's start with cultural competence. What are we talking about there?
Cultural competence is about having the awareness, knowledge, and skills to work effectively with people from diverse cultural backgrounds. It means respecting their values, beliefs, and practices and adapting your approach accordingly.
And why is it so important? What are the benefits?
The benefits are huge. It builds trust, promotes respect, reduces misunderstandings and bias, and ultimately leads to much better outcomes for clients because the services actually fit their cultural context.
Okay, and how does cultural humility build on that? It sounds slightly different.
It is different, and many see it as an evolution of competence. Cultural humility isn't about mastering knowledge about other cultures. It's more of an ongoing stance. It involves recognizing you don't know everything, being open to learning from clients, challenging your own assumptions and biases, and acknowledging power imbalances. So it's a lifelong process.
Exactly. It's about lifelong learning, critical self-reflection, and seeing the client as the expert on their own experience. It's less about having arrived somewhere and more about the continuous journey of learning and self-correction.
So practically speaking, if you're a social worker meeting a client from a background you know very little about, what's the culturally humble first step?
The first step is curiosity and respect. Ask open-ended questions. Genuinely express your desire to understand their perspective, listen more than you talk, and explicitly acknowledge that they are the expert on their life and culture. Avoid making assumptions.
That sounds like a much more collaborative approach.
It is, and we need this understanding because cultural differences really do shape experiences. Our sources mention an example involving collectivist cultures.
Right. In many collectivist cultures, group harmony and family needs might be prioritized over individual autonomy or desires. So a client might make decisions based on what's best for their family, even if it seems counterintuitive from a more individualistic perspective.
And a culturally responsive worker needs to.
Precisely. They create unique combinations of privilege and oppression. So you can't understand someone's experience just by looking at their race or just their gender. You have to see how those identities intersect to shape their reality, their opportunities, the barriers they face. It gives you that bigger, more complex picture.
Oh, okay. And another term that's gained prominence is microaggressions. What are those, and why is it important to recognize them?
Microaggressions are those everyday slights, snubs, or insults, often subtle, sometimes unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to people based on their marginalized group membership.
Like small comments or actions.
Yeah, things like, "You speak English so well,"
Hmm.
to an Asian American, or clutching a purse tighter when a black man walks by. Individually, they might seem small, but they accumulate over time.
Causing harm.
Definitely. They cause significant psychological harm, creating stress, eroding self-esteem, and making spaces feel unsafe or unwelcoming. Recognizing them is vital for creating genuinely inclusive environments where clients feel seen and respected.
Okay, shifting focus slightly to trauma-informed care. What's the absolute key feature of that approach?
The absolute key feature is creating an environment, physical and emotional, that ensures safety and actively avoids re-traumatizing individuals who have experienced trauma. It assumes trauma might be part of a person's history, even if they haven't disclosed it.
And what's the foundational principle underpinning that?
The foundational principle is establishing safety and trustworthiness. Trauma often shatters a person's sense of safety and trust, so rebuilding that foundation is paramount before any other therapeutic work can effectively happen.
Which means the role of client choice must be huge in this model.
Oh, absolutely essential. Trauma often involves a profound loss of control. So providing clients with choices, even small ones, about their care, their environment, the pace of the work, is incredibly empowering. It helps them regain a sense of agency and safety, which is crucial for healing.
That makes so much sense. So bringing confidentiality and safety together. Let's consider a scenario. A teen client tells their social worker they identify as LGBTQ plus soleo, but they haven't come out to their parents yet. And maybe they're scared to. So what does this all mean when client safety and trust are paramount, even within the family unit? How does the worker handle that?
This is a delicate but clear ethical situation. The social worker's primary duty is to the client, the teen. That means respecting their confidentiality. You absolutely do not out the client to their parents without the client's explicit consent.
Even if the parents are paying for therapy.
Even then, the therapeutic relationship is with the teen. The role is to support the teen, explore their feelings, help them assess the safety and potential consequences of disclosing, perhaps help them plan how to tell their parents if and when they feel ready. But the decision and timing belong to the client. Rushing it or revealing it against their will violates trust and could even put them at risk.
So client autonomy and safety first. Always. Okay, we've covered so much ground. Principles, practices, ethics. Let's maybe bring it toward wrapping up by looking at the ongoing journey. Client challenges, resilience, and the continuous growth needed in this field.
Sounds good. When we look at clients facing difficulties, the concept of resilience often comes up. What does that actually look like? How do people bounce back?
Resilience isn't about not struggling. It's about adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant stress. It often involves developing effective coping skills, building self-awareness, having strong social support systems, and finding meaning or purpose.
And social workers can help build that.
Definitely. They can help clients identify their existing strengths, learn new coping strategies, connect with supportive people or resources, and reframe challenging experiences. It's about fostering those protective factors.
Now, on the flip side, for the social worker themselves, there's the risk of compassion fatigue. What's a major warning sign of that?
A key sign is often emotional exhaustion, feeling numb, or becoming detached or cynical about clients and their struggles. It's like the empathy well has run dry.
And recognizing that is critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it not only harms the social worker's well-being, but it directly impacts their ability to provide effective, empathetic care. Recognizing it is the first step towards seeking support and implementing self-care strategies to prevent full burnout.
Okay. What about when a client's engagement is patchy? They miss appointments, don't follow through. What's the social worker's first move?
The first step isn't judgment. It's curiosity and documentation. You note the inconsistency, and then you try to explore the reasons with the client collaboratively. Are there practical barriers like transport or childcare? Are they feeling ambivalent? Is the approach not working for them?
So problem solving together.
Exactly. Understand the why before assuming lack of motivation. It's about addressing the underlying barriers to engagement.
Shifting perspective to the community level, what kind of signs might suggest a whole community could benefit from social work intervention, more macro level work?
and licensed. Most licensing boards require it. It's about that commitment to lifelong learning to provide the best possible service and adapt to the changing needs of clients and communities. You can't rely on what you learned years ago. The field moves too fast.
Got it. And finally, for the professionals themselves, continuing education. Why is that ongoing learning so non-negotiable in social work?
It's absolutely vital because the world changes, research evolves, new social problems emerge, laws get updated, and best practices improve. Continuing education ensures social workers stay current, competent, and ethical.
Wow, what an incredible journey through this field. We've really covered a lot from that foundational moral GPS of the Code of Ethics through understanding clients with things like the strengths-based perspective and self-determination, the practical tools like assessments and treatment plans, the critical need for boundaries, the nuances of cultural humility and trauma-informed care. It's a huge landscape.
It really is. And I hope what comes across is that this isn't just about learning terms or theories. It's about understanding what it truly means to try and be a protector for people who are vulnerable, an advocate for fairness, a voice for healing in a complex world.
That's powerful. It really elevates the knowledge beyond just the profession.
Yeah, because these skills, empathy, ethical thinking, understanding systems, advocating, they're fundamentally human skills.
Which leads to a final thought for everyone listening. So what does it mean for you to apply these principles, this understanding, this empathy, this ethical awareness in your own life? Even if you're not a social worker, how might you use this lens when you encounter vulnerability or injustice in your own community, your workplace, or just your daily interactions? What stands out to Wayue from this deep dive into social work?